The winter wind howled through the Montana wilderness as Ranger James Barrett tracked the strange lights that had torn across the evening sky. 20 years of Forest Service hadn't prepared him for anything like this. The meteor, if that's what it was, had carved a path through his sector of the Bitterroot National Forest, leaving behind a trail of broken trees and scorched earth. Through his thermal imaging binoculars, Barrett spotted an unusual heat signature ahead. Not the typical warm glow of cooling debris, but something else, a pattern too regular to be natural. The crunch of snow under his boots seemed deafening in the otherwise silent forest as he approached the impact site. The crash had created a crater about 30 feet wide, with twisted metal scattered across the snow. The object wasn't any aircraft he recognized. Its smooth, oval surface reflected the moonlight with an iridescent sheen that seemed to shift colors as he moved. Steam rose from where the hot metal met the snow, creating an otherworldly mist. A sound caught his attention, something between a whimper and a song, unlike anything he'd heard in his years in the wilderness. Barrett drew his flashlight, following the sound to a section of the wreckage. There, partially hidden beneath a curved panel, he saw her. The being was humanoid but clearly not human. Her skin had a subtle luminescence, like moonlight through ice, and her hair seemed to float as if suspended in water despite the heavy gravity of Earth. What struck Barrett most were her eyes, 3 of them, arranged in a triangle, each one shifting between shades of purple and gold. "Easy now," he said softly, holstering his sidearm and raising his empty hands. "I'm not going to hurt you." The alien's 3 eyes focused on him, and he felt a strange sensation in his mind, like static electricity but deeper. She tried to move but collapsed with a cry of pain. Her body was clearly struggling with Earth's atmosphere, her breathing labored, her movements growing weaker by the second. Barrett knew he had about 30 minutes before his regular check-in time with dispatch. If he reported this, the area would be swarming with government agencies within hours. Looking at the injured being before him, he made a decision that would change his life forever. "I'm going to help you," he said, approaching slowly. "But we need to move fast." The alien seemed to understand, reaching out with a 6-fingered hand. Her skin was cool to the touch, almost crystalline. Barrett removed his heavy ranger coat and wrapped it around her, noting how she seemed to relax slightly at his touch, as if drawing strength from the contact. Getting her to his cabin wouldn't be easy. It was 3 miles through difficult terrain, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. But as Barrett lifted her surprisingly light form, he felt her consciousness brush against his mind again, not with words, but with feelings, gratitude, fear, and desperate hope. The journey back was treacherous. Twice they had to hide from search aircraft that already seemed to be combing the area. The alien's condition deteriorated with each passing minute, her luminescence fading like a dying star. Barrett found himself talking to her constantly, telling her about Earth, about the forest, about anything to keep her conscious. By the time they reached his cabin, she was barely conscious. Barrett laid her on his bed, watching in fascination as her body seemed to adapt to the new environment. Her breathing steadied slightly, and the painful rigidity in her muscles began to ease. "Kira," she whispered suddenly, the word appearing in Barrett's mind as she spoke it. "I am Kira." "James Barrett," he replied, wondering if she could understand him. "You're safe here." Kira's 3 eyes closed briefly, then opened with renewed focus. "Your atmosphere, poisonous to my kind. Need, molecular reconstruction. Help." Barrett watched in alarm as her luminescence flickered like a failing light bulb. "What do you need? How can I help?" Bonding, she managed to communicate, more through images in his mind than words. DNA exchange, temporary fusion, survive. The implications slowly dawned on Barrett. She needed to adapt to Earth's atmosphere by somehow incorporating human DNA into her own cellular structure. It was either help her begin this process or watch her die. As government helicopters thundered in the distance, Barrett made his choice. He took her hand, and the world exploded into light and sensation as their genetic codes began to merge. His last conscious thought was a hope that he'd made the right decision, not just for Kira, but for all of humanity. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, others of Kira's kind were watching, waiting to see if Earth would prove to be a sanctuary or a grave for one of their own. The answer would determine the fate of both their worlds. Barrett awoke to find his cabin bathed in a soft, pulsing light. Kira's form had changed during their genetic exchange, her skin now held a more human-like texture while retaining its ethereal glow, and her third eye had receded into a barely visible mark on her forehead. She sat by his window, watching the sunrise with an expression of wonder. The molecular reconstruction, she spoke, her words now clear in both his mind and the air, it was successful. Your genetic pattern is fascinating. More adaptable than any species I've encountered. Barrett sat up slowly, his head still spinning from the previous night's events. How long was I out? Your son has completed one cycle, Kira replied, turning to face him. I used the time to learn your language from our genetic memory exchange. Your kind's method of communication is inefficient, but beautiful in its complexity. The sound of distant rotors interrupted their conversation. Black helicopters swept across the valley below, methodically searching the area. Kira's luminescence dimmed slightly, a reaction Barrett now recognized as fear. They're looking for you, he said, moving to peek through the curtains. The crash site must have attracted more attention than I hoped. The ones who search, Kira's voice held a note of concern, they are not the first humans to hunt my kind. There were others, before me. They did not survive their encounters with your world's authorities. Barrett turned to her sharply. There were others. How many? 7 ships, over what you call decades. All lost. All who came were seeking sanctuary from a war that consumes our galaxy. Earth was meant to be a haven, but its atmosphere proves fatal without adaptation. Those who came before me, they did not find humans willing to help them transform. The implications hit Barrett like a physical blow. So they died because nobody would help them adapt. Nobody would share their DNA. Yes. Your government found them first. Tried to study them. But without the genetic bond, my kind cannot survive in your atmosphere for more than a few of your days. A sharp knock at the door made them both freeze. Barrett motioned for Kira to hide in the bedroom while he approached the entrance, his heart pounding. Ranger Barrett, a familiar voice called out. It's Thomas from dispatch. Got a minute? Barrett opened the door to find his colleague standing there, looking unusually serious. Thomas was a good man, but also thoroughly by the book. Quite a light show last night, Thomas said, trying to peer past Barrett into the cabin. Militaries all over the place. They're saying it was a classified drone crash. Is that what they're calling it? Barrett kept his voice neutral. I was asleep early. Didn't see much. Thomas studied him for a long moment. They're going cabin to cabin. Looking for something. Want to tell me what's really going on, James? Before Barrett could respond, a sound came from the bedroom, the subtle hum that accompanied Kira's presence. Thomas's hand moved to his radio. James, he said slowly, are you in some kind of trouble? The moment stretched like a wire about to snap. Then, to Barrett's shock, Kira emerged from the bedroom. Her appearance had changed again, now she looked almost completely human, save for a subtle glow beneath her skin. He is protecting me, she said, her voice carrying that otherworldly resonance that no human could quite replicate. As you once protected others, Thomas Hayes. Thomas's face went white. How did you? That was 30 years ago. The crash in Oregon. You helped one of my kind, Kira said softly. She was my sister. She did not survive, but she passed on the memory of your kindness before she died. Barrett watched the exchange in amazement as Thomas slowly lowered his hand from his radio. The older ranger's eyes were filled with tears. I never knew if I did the right thing, Thomas whispered. All these years, I've wondered. You did, Kira assured him. And now we need your help again. Others will come, seeking sanctuary. Earth could be a bridge between our worlds, but first we must survive. The sound of helicopters grew closer. Thomas looked between them, then made his decision. There's an old fire watch station, he said quickly. Up in the high country. Off the grid, abandoned years ago. I can get you there, but we have to move now. As they quickly gathered supplies, Barrett felt a new sensation through his genetic link with Kira, hope, tinged with determination. They weren't just running for survival now, they were fighting for a future where two worlds could meet in peace. But first, they had to survive the night. The helicopters were getting closer, and somewhere in the darkness, decisions were being made that would determine not just their fate, but potentially the fate of two civilizations. Thomas led them to his ranger vehicle, and as they drove into the gathering dusk, Barrett realized that their small group of outcasts might be the last hope for a peaceful first contact between humanity and the stars. The weight of that responsibility settled over him like a physical presence as they wound their way up into the mountains, leaving the searchlights and helicopters behind. For now. The old fire watch station creaked in the mountain wind as Barrett kept vigil at the window. 3 days had passed since their escape, and Kira's strength was growing. The genetic bond had changed them both, he could sense her presence even when she was out of sight, and sometimes caught glimpses of memories that weren't his own, vast crystal cities floating in space, battles between ships that looked like living creatures, and a terrible darkness consuming entire worlds. They call themselves the Void Hunters, Kira said softly, joining him at the window. They're the reason my people flee. They don't just destroy worlds, they consume them, turn them into weapons. Earth is one of the few planets they haven't found yet. Thomas entered from his patrol, shaking snow from his coat. Militaries set up checkpoints on all the major roads. They're showing pictures of what they're calling persons of interest, both of you. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. Barrett watched Kira's reflection in the window. Why didn't you tell me about the others? The ones who came before. Because I needed you to help me for the right reasons, she replied. Not out of fear or duty, but from choice. The bond, it only works if both parties enter it willingly. That's why the governments failed in their attempts to force it. A distant rumbling made them all freeze. Thomas pulled out his binoculars and scanned the valley below. Convoy, he reported grimly. Military vehicles. They're heading up the access road. They're following our genetic signature, Kira explained, her luminescence flickering with anxiety. The bond leaves traces they can track. We need to move. There's nowhere left to go, Thomas said. Unless. He hesitated, looking uncertain. Unless what? Barrett pressed. There's stories among the old-timers. About a place up in the high mountains. They called it the Sanctuary. Said it was where the star people used to meet with humans, centuries ago. Most folks thought it was just legends, but after what happened in Oregon. Kira's 3 eyes, now visible again as her human disguise faded with stress, widened in recognition. The gathering place. It still exists. If it does, it's up there, Thomas pointed to a distant peak shrouded in clouds. But it's treacherous terrain, especially in winter. A spotlight swept the trees below, and they heard the whomp-whomp of helicopter rotors. Their time had run out. We don't have a choice, Barrett said, grabbing their emergency packs. Whatever this sanctuary is, it's our only option. They slipped out the back of the station just as the first vehicles reached the access road. The night was moonless, but Kira's natural bioluminescence provided just enough light to navigate by. They pushed through deep snow, climbing higher into the mountains. The cold was brutal, but the genetic bond had changed Barrett's physiology enough that he could withstand it better than before. He could feel Kira's presence in his mind growing stronger as they ascended, and with it came new understanding. Your people, he said as they paused to catch their breath, they've been watching Earth for millennia, haven't they? Not just decades. Yes, she confirmed. We recognized humanity's potential long ago. Your adaptability, your resilience, it's unique among all the species we've encountered. That's why the Void Hunters must never find this world. With human genetics in their arsenal, nothing could stop them. An explosion lit up the night behind them, the military destroying the fire watch station. Thomas led them through a narrow pass, the wind howling around them. There, he shouted over the gale, pointing to a dark opening in the rock face ahead. That has to be it. As they approached the cave entrance, Barrett felt a strange resonance through his bond with Kira. The rock walls were covered in ancient symbols that seemed to shift and move in the light of Kira's glow. The gathering place, she breathed, touching the symbols reverently. For thousands of years, my people met with chosen humans here, sharing knowledge, preparing. Preparing for what? Barrett asked, though part of him already knew the answer. For now. For the moment when humanity would have to choose, remain isolated on Earth, or join us in the fight against the darkness that threatens all worlds. The cave system suddenly lit up with an ethereal blue light, responding to Kira's presence. As they ventured deeper, they found chambers filled with technology that seemed to grow from the living rock itself. And they weren't alone. Welcome, sister, a voice echoed from the shadows. A figure stepped forward, another of Kira's kind, but older, more adapted to Earth. Behind him stood a group of humans, their skin showing the same subtle luminescence that Barrett now carried. I am Guardian Reed, the figure said. And you finally found us. Now the real work begins. Thomas stared in amazement. All these years, there were others. A whole organization. We are the Guardians, Reed explained. Humans and Lumini working together, preparing Earth's defenses. Because the Void Hunters aren't just coming, they're already here. And what happens next depends on how many more humans choose to stand with us. Barrett looked at Kira, seeing in her eyes both fear and determination. They'd found sanctuary, but they'd also found something far bigger, a secret war for the fate of two worlds, and they were now at the heart of it. Above them, military helicopters swept the mountainside, searching for their quarry. But in the depths of the ancient gathering place, a new chapter in human history was about to begin. The only question was, how many would be brave enough to help write it? The ancient chamber hummed with energy as Guardian Reed led them deeper into the sanctuary. Barrett's enhanced senses picked up subtle vibrations in the crystalline walls, a technology so advanced it seemed alive. Around them, other human Lumini pairs worked at stations that grew organically from the rock, monitoring what appeared to be a vast network of sensors across the globe. The Void Hunters have agents in every major government, Reed explained, his three eyes shifting colors as he spoke. They've been infiltrating Earth's power structures for decades, preparing for full invasion. The military units hunting you aren't just looking for Kira, they're eliminating anyone who might expose their presence. Like my sister in Oregon, Thomas said quietly. They didn't just want to study her. They wanted to silence her. A young woman with luminescent skin approached them, her movements carrying the same ethereal grace as Kira's. Guardian Reed, we're detecting increased activity in the valley. They're establishing a perimeter around the mountain. Thank you, Jessica, Reed nodded. It seems our guests brought unwanted attention to our doorstep. Barrett watched the interplay between humans and Lumini with fascination. How many of you are there? Worldwide? Perhaps 1,000 bonded pairs, Reed replied. Not enough. The Void Hunters are positioning their ships just beyond your moon, cloaked from Earth's primitive detection systems. When they strike, they'll target major population centers first, trying to force a quick surrender. Kira moved to one of the organic terminals, her hands dancing over surfaces that responded to her touch. The signal from my crash, they'll use it to initiate their attack. We have days at most. Then we fight, Barrett said firmly. We warn people, expose them. It's not that simple, Reed sighed. The genetic bond that allows us to share our abilities with humans, it can't be forced. Each person must choose it willingly, knowing the risks. Most humans, when faced with the truth, react with fear rather than acceptance. A distant explosion rocked the chamber. Dust fell from the ceiling as alarm signals pulsed through the crystal walls. "They're using thermal imaging to scan the mountain," Jessica reported. "Standard military units at the base, but I'm detecting void energy signatures among their leadership. They're here." Reed's expression darkened. "Sooner than we expected. They must have detected the energy signature when you accessed the sanctuary's systems. What do we do?" Thomas asked, his ranger training kicking in as he assessed exits and defensive positions. "We evacuate," Reed decided. "Through the ancient tunnels. There are other sanctuaries, hidden places where we can regroup. But first." He turned to Barrett and Kira. "You two represent something new. Your bond, it's stronger than any we've seen before. The genetic integration is nearly perfect." Kira's eyes widened. "The convergence protocol. It's possible." "The what?" Barrett asked, feeling waves of excitement and fear rolling off Kira through their bond. "A theoretical process," she explained quickly. "If a human and Lamini achieve perfect genetic harmony, they can trigger a cascade effect, spreading the potential for bonding to others without direct contact. It could allow us to create more pairs quickly enough to mount a real defense." Another explosion, closer this time. The crystal walls trembled. "It's never been achieved before," Reed warned. "The stress could kill you both. But if it works..." "If it works, we give humanity a fighting chance," Barrett finished. He looked at Kira, their bond thrumming with shared purpose. "How do we do it?" Jessica led them to a circular chamber deep within the mountain. Ancient symbols covered the walls, pulsing with their own light. At the center stood a crystal formation that seemed to reach both up to the ceiling and down into the Earth's core. "The chamber will amplify your connection," Reed explained as they took position. "But the process, you'll have to figure it out yourselves. Each successful bond is unique." Thomas stood watch at the entrance as the other Guardians began their evacuation. "Whatever you're going to do it fast. They're getting closer." Barrett took Kira's hands, feeling the energy of the chamber responding to their combined presence. Through their bond, he could sense her completely now, not just her thoughts and memories, but the very essence of what she was. She was no longer simply alien or other, she was part of him, as he was part of her. The crystal formation began to glow, responding to their deepening connection. Above them, the military forces began their final approach, unaware that the next few moments would determine not just the fate of those in the mountain, but potentially the future of both their species. Their world narrowed to the space between heartbeats as the convergence began, and with it, the greatest gamble in human history. The crystal chamber erupted with light as Barrett and Kira's consciousness merged completely. Their shared genetic bond expanded, resonating with the ancient technology surrounding them. Through their combined senses, they could feel every molecule of air, every vibration in the mountain, every heartbeat of the retreating Guardians. The Void Hunters were closing in. Barrett could feel their wrongness, their corrupted energy signatures bleeding through the rock like oil on water. They weren't just aliens, they were something that violated the natural order of life itself. "They're breaching the outer defenses," Thomas called from his position. "Whatever you're doing, it needs to happen now." Through their merged consciousness, Kira shared the true nature of the convergence protocol. It wasn't just about spreading the potential for bonding, it was about awakening something that had laid dormant in human DNA since the first Lamini visited Earth millennia ago. Your ancestors, Kira's thoughts merged with Barrett's, they weren't just random subjects for genetic experiments. They were chosen because they carried a specific genetic marker, one that made them compatible with our essence. That marker has been passed down, spreading through the human population over thousands of generations. Barrett understood now. The Void Hunters, they're not just invading Earth. They're trying to prevent this from happening. The chamber's crystals pulsed in sync with their heightened awareness. Above them, the first explosive charges detonated against the sanctuary's outer walls. Through their shared consciousness, they began the transformation. The ancient chamber responded, amplifying their combined energy outward in expanding waves. Every human within range who carried the dormant genetic marker would feel it, a sudden awakening, a realization of potential they never knew they had. Guardian Reed's voice echoed from the corridor, "The evacuation is complete. We've rigged the secondary tunnels to collapse. Stay with us," Barrett managed to say through the overwhelming sensations. "We'll need you for what comes next." The chamber's energy reached a crescendo as the first Void Hunters breached the inner sanctum. They moved like living shadows, their forms shifting and writhing in ways that hurt the eyes to observe. But now Barrett and Kira could see their true nature, parasites that had evolved to consume not just bodies, but entire civilizations. The convergence wave hit its peak. Across the mountain range, across the country, across the world, humans with the dormant marker felt something awaken. Not all would accept it, not all would understand, but enough would. Enough to make a difference. The first Void Hunter launched itself at the crystal chamber, only to be met by Thomas, his body now emanating the same luminescence as the Lumini. The genetic awakening had worked. Humans who carried the marker could now access their dormant abilities without needing direct bonds. "Well," Thomas said, his hands glowing with newly awakened power, "this is different." The battle that followed was unlike anything Earth had ever seen. The Void Hunters' shadowy powers clashed with the combined might of awakened humans and Lumini. The mountain itself seemed to respond, the ancient technology of the sanctuary providing defense and support. Through it all, Barrett and Kira maintained the convergence field, their combined consciousness touching minds across the globe, sharing the truth of what was coming and what was possible. They felt each awakening, each moment of realization as humans discovered their hidden potential. The Void Hunters, realizing their advantage was slipping away, began to retreat. Their carefully laid plans for invasion were useless now, humanity would not be the easy prey they had anticipated. As the energy field stabilized, Barrett and Kira slowly separated their consciousness while maintaining their bond. The chamber's light dimmed to a sustainable glow, its purpose fulfilled. "It's done," Kira said softly, her three eyes shimmering with exhaustion and hope. "The awakening has begun." Reed helped them stand as Thomas secured the chamber. The other sanctuaries report similar phenomena worldwide. Thousands of humans are manifesting abilities. The Void Hunters' Earth-based agents are being exposed and contained. "But this is just the beginning," Barrett said, understanding flowing through his enhanced awareness. "The Void Hunters will return with their full fleet. Earth will need to be ready." "Earth will be ready," Thomas said, his newfound power humming beneath his words. "Because we're not hiding anymore. The time for secrets is over." Through their bond, Barrett and Kira shared a vision of the future, human and Lumini, standing together against the darkness between stars. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with both wonder and danger. But they had given humanity a chance, awakened a potential that had slumbered for millennia. As they emerged from the sanctuary into the dawn of a new day, they saw military helicopters retreating in the distance. Soon, the world would know the truth. Soon, humanity would have to choose its path forward. But for now, in this moment, they had won their first victory. The sky above was clearing, and somewhere up there, the Void Hunters' ships were withdrawing to regroup. Earth had time now, time to prepare, time to evolve, time to become something new. The real story was just beginning. "Ready?" Kira asked, her hand finding Barrett's as they looked out over the awakening world. "Ready," he replied, feeling the future unfold before them like the pages of an endless story. Together, they took their first steps into a new chapter of human history, one where the stars themselves were no longer the limit.